The summons arrived on a Tuesday, which Marcus Webb felt was cosmically unfair, because Tuesdays were supposed to involve maintenance reports and mediocre coffee, not diplomatic couriers materializing in his apartment with sealed containers that pulsed with alien bioluminescence. Marcus Webb, formerly Corporal Webb, 3rd Infantry, Coalition Expeditionary Forces. The courier already knew the answer because couriers always did. "That's what my discharge papers claim," Marcus said, eyeing the ornate container. "Though if this is about parking violations, I sold that speeder 3 years ago, and the new owner's problem is not my problem. This is a formal summons from the Virin Empire. You are requested to appear before the Imperial Court on Virin Prime within 7 standard days. Transportation has been arranged. Refusal is inadvisable." The courier set the container on Marcus's kitchen table where it looked absurd next to dirty dishes and technical manuals, then left before Marcus could ask the several thousand questions crowding his brain. The container opened at his touch, revealing documentation in both Terran Standard and flowing Virin script, official seals, diplomatic credentials, and a personal message that made his coffee go cold. "Your presence is required by order of Queen Ashira Valtek. The matter is of utmost personal importance." Marcus sat heavily, memories he'd successfully suppressed for 6 years suddenly demanding attention, with the persistence of alarms during combat drills. The battlefield had been a frozen hellscape on a world whose name he'd forgotten, because remembering seemed like giving it more importance than it deserved. Coalition forces were retreating under heavy artillery, the sky burning with plasma fire while the ground split from seismic charges. Standard military disaster, bad intelligence, worse planning, soldiers paying the price for both. He'd been moving through wreckage when he found her, half buried in rubble, armor shattered, blood that was almost but not quite the right color spreading across frozen ground. His brain registered wounded person before it registered alien enemy, and by then his hands were already moving, clearing debris, checking for injuries that would kill her before he could get her to safety. Her eyes had opened, glowing faintly amber in dim light, and she'd made a sound that might have been protest or pain. Probably both. "I've got you," Marcus had said, which was optimistic given he was surrounded by active combat, and carrying a wounded enemy soldier was the kind of thing that got you killed in interesting ways. "Just don't die on me. I've got a thing about people dying on me." She tried to speak, her language incomprehensible then, her hand gripping his arm with surprising strength. Then her eyes rolled back and she went limp, and Marcus made the spectacularly stupid decision to carry her toward evacuation, instead of leaving her for Virin recovery teams. The journey involved more explosions than Marcus preferred, which was to say any explosions at all. He dodged artillery fire, navigated collapsing infrastructure, and at one point physically shielded her body when debris came raining down. His commanding officer screamed orders to leave her and extract immediately, and Marcus ignored orders in ways that would definitely feature prominently in his personnel file. He'd gotten her to medical evac, handed her to medics who looked at him like he'd lost his mind, then been immediately pulled back into retreat chaos. Later, he tried to find out what happened to her, whether she survived, been repatriated, anything, but war bureaucracy had swallowed that information completely. Eventually, he filed it under "things I did that probably didn't matter," and tried to move on. Now, staring at a summons from the Virin Imperial Court, Marcus was forced to reconsider whether it had mattered after all. The transport they'd arranged was considerably nicer than military vessels, which prioritized function over comfort to degrees, suggesting designers actively hated soldiers. This ship had actual padding on seats, viewports showing something besides tactical displays, and food that didn't taste like it had been assembled from constituent molecules with grudging resentment. The crew was Virin, tall, elegant, with pointed ears marking their species, skin tones ranging from deep bronze to pale silver. They were polite in ways suggesting very specific instructions about his treatment, and they avoided answering questions about why the imperial court wanted to see him. "You will understand when you arrive," the captain said, offering the kind of non-answer that made Marcus want to throw something. "Queen Ashira has been very clear about maintaining discretion." Marcus spent the 3-day journey reviewing what the ship's database would provide about Virin Prime and its current ruler. Queen Ashira Valtek had ascended to the throne 8 years ago during the war's height, following her mother's assassination by extremist factions opposed to negotiating with humanity. She was young for a monarch by Virin standards, brilliant by any standards, and had a military record that made Marcus's combat history look like practice exercises. What the database didn't explain was why she wanted to see one random ex-soldier who'd spent the last 6 years maintaining atmospheric processors and avoiding responsibility. Virin Prime appeared through the viewport like a jewel against space, its 3 moons creating tidal patterns that had shaped the planet's entire ecosystem. The palace complex was visible from orbit, sprawling structures combining architecture with living crystal formations in ways that made human buildings look tragically boring. Landing approach took them directly to palace grounds, bypassing civilian spaceports. Guards in ceremonial armor that probably also functioned as highly effective combat equipment watched as Marcus disembarked. Former Corporal Marcus Webb, an official, announced, his Terran standard perfect but carrying the musical accent of Virin language patterns. "You are expected. Follow, please." They led him through corridors that managed to be both beautiful and vaguely threatening, past artwork depicting Virin history in styles ranging from ancient to contemporary. Marcus noticed several pieces showing war scenes, wondering uncomfortably whether any depicted battles he'd participated in from the other side. Finally, they arrived at massive doors that looked grown rather than built, crystalline structures interweaving with organic materials in patterns that hurt to look at directly. Guards stepped aside without being asked, and doors opened with silence suggesting mechanisms far more sophisticated than simple hinges. The chamber beyond was vast, designed to make visitors feel appropriately small. And on the throne, elevated on a dais of living crystal, sat a woman who made Marcus's heart stop for reasons he couldn't immediately process. She wore formal regalia, deep blue fabric threaded with silver that caught light like captured starlight, pointed ears rising through midnight hair bound in complex patterns denoting rank and lineage. Her face was beautiful in ways predatory animals were beautiful, all elegant lines and focused purpose, and her eyes were amber catching fire. He knew those eyes. He'd seen them on a frozen battlefield, glowing faintly as their owner clung to life in his arms. Queen Ashira Valtek stood slowly, descending steps with measured grace that made the movement seem inevitable. She stopped precisely 3 meters away, the traditional Virin distance for formal acknowledgement, and when she spoke her voice carried across the chamber with perfect clarity. "Do you recall me, soldier?" Marcus's mouth had gone dry. His brain was trying to process that the wounded soldier he'd carried through hell was apparently the queen of the entire Virin Empire, and his brain was not handling this information well. "I remember," he managed. "Frozen battlefield. You were buried in rubble. I got you to medical evac and then never found out what happened to you." "What happened," Ashira said, moving closer, "is that you saved the life of the crown princess of the Virin Empire. I was fighting beside my people, hiding my identity because I believed leaders should share their soldiers' risks. The battle went poorly. I would have died there, frozen and forgotten, if you had not refused to abandon me. But I didn't know you were royalty. I just saw someone who needed help." "Yes." Something in her expression shifted, becoming warmer. "You saw a person who needed help and you helped, despite danger, despite orders to retreat, despite every tactical reason to leave me behind. Do you have any idea how that changed things, Marcus Webb?" The use of his first name felt significant. I'm guessing it had political ramifications. It had every ramification. Ashira gestured, and the chamber's walls suddenly displayed holographic imagery, news reports, historical documentation, footage of her recovery and return to her people. When I returned alive, when they learned a human soldier had saved me at great personal risk, it changed the war's narrative, made peace possible, made me possible as queen rather than martyr. Marcus watched images, seeing a younger version of the woman before him being welcomed back, seeing political shifts that had followed, peace negotiations that had succeeded partly, because the crown princess had been saved by an enemy soldier showing unexpected humanity. I've been searching for you, Ashira said quietly. 6 years, Marcus Webb. I have been searching, wanting to thank you, wanting to understand the person who touched me without fear when I was dying, who carried me like I mattered when I was just another casualty. She stepped closer, well within formal distance now, and wanting to repay a debt that can never truly be repaid. You don't owe me anything, Marcus said. I just did what anyone would. No. Her hand touched his face, gentle despite the strength he knew she possessed. Anyone would have left me. Anyone sensible, anyone following orders, anyone thinking tactically. But you didn't. You saved me, and I have not forgotten. Her amber eyes held his, and Marcus realized with excitement and terror that being remembered by a queen was considerably more complicated than he'd anticipated. Welcome to my court, Marcus Webb, Queen Ashira said, her smile containing promises he didn't yet understand. We have much to discuss about debts and gratitude, and what happens when queens remember the soldiers who saved them. The quarters they'd assigned Marcus were approximately 17 times nicer than anywhere he'd lived in his entire life, including a brief period in officer housing due to administrative error. Actual windows overlooking palace gardens, furniture designed for comfort rather than efficient storage, and a bathroom with water pressure suggesting VRIN engineering had solved problems humanity was still struggling with. He was attempting to process the last 3 hours when someone knocked with polite insistence that suggested refusing wasn't really an option. The visitor was a VRIN woman roughly his age, wearing formal attire marking her as palace staff, her pointed ears adorned with silver rings indicating senior administrative position. Her expression suggested she found this situation either amusing or bewildering, possibly both. Former Corporal Webb, I am Selenith, first secretary to Queen Ashira. I have been instructed to ensure you are comfortable and to answer questions that do not violate state security protocols. She paused. I am also instructed to be honest with you, which is unusual enough that I should mention it. Honest is good, Marcus said. Let's start with, what exactly am I doing here? Selenith entered, glancing around as if inspecting accommodations. You are here because our queen has thought about you every day for 6 years. You are here because she watched footage of battlefield recovery and saw you shielding her body from debris with your own. You are here because when she was dying, you spoke to her in a language she did not yet understand but a tone that transcended language, and she heard you promise not to let her die. That's a lot of weight to put on about 15 minutes of battlefield rescue. Those 15 minutes changed the course of an empire. Selenith sat, gesturing for Marcus to do the same. When the crown princess returned alive, it demonstrated that humans were capable of compassion even toward enemies. It made her father's faction advocating for peace negotiations stronger. It made her eventual ascension to the throne possible when extremists assassinated her parents. She became a symbol of survival and the possibility of different relations between our peoples. Marcus sat heavily. So I accidentally became a political symbol by not leaving someone to die. That's uncomfortable. Welcome to life adjacent to monarchy. Everything means something, and nothing is ever simple. Selenith's expression softened slightly. But I should tell you, the Queen's interest in you is not purely political. She has been haunted by you, Marcus Webb. by the memory of someone who saw her at her most vulnerable and chose kindness. It is not something she has experienced often. She's a queen. Surely people are kind to her constantly. People are deferential, respectful, careful, but kind. Selenith shook her head. Kindness requires seeing someone as a person rather than a position. You did that when she was dying. You did not know she was royalty. You simply saw someone who needed help and you helped. Do you understand how rare that is in her world? Before Marcus could respond, another knock interrupted. This time a guard delivering a message that Queen Ashira requested Marcus's presence for evening meal. Private. Alone. Selenith stood, her smile knowing. The Queen does not make casual requests. I suggest you accept, unless you wish to spend the rest of your visit wondering what might have been discussed. An hour later, Marcus found himself being escorted to private quarters within the palace, past security that made coalition military checkpoints look casual. Guards outside the final door stepped aside without comment, and Marcus entered to find a space that was part royal apartment and part something more intimate. Queen Ashira was waiting, having changed from formal regalia into something simpler, deep green fabric that still looked regal while being practical enough to move in. Her hair was unbound, falling past her shoulders, and without formal trappings she looked younger, still dangerous, but younger. Marcus Webb, she said, gesturing to a table where food had been arranged. Thank you for joining me. I realize this entire situation must be overwhelming. That's one word for it. Marcus sat where indicated, noting the seating positioned them across from each other rather than at formal distance. Your Majesty, I'm still trying to understand why I'm here. Selenith mentioned you've been searching for me, but surely a queen has more important concerns than tracking down random soldiers who did one decent thing 6 years ago. You were not random, and it was not just one thing. Ashira poured something into glasses, her movements precise. When I regained consciousness in your medical facility, I asked about the human soldier who saved me. They told me you had returned to combat, that you survived the war, that you were discharged honorably. But they could not tell me where you went afterward. I didn't exactly advertise my location. After the war, I wanted quiet. Normal, boring. And yet here you are, summoned by a queen who never forgot you. She raised her glass to unexpected reunions and complicated gratitude. They drank, and Marcus discovered Virin beverages were considerably smoother than expected. The food was equally impressive, though he suspected some had been modified for human consumption. Tell me about the battlefield, Ashira said. What you remember, what you thought. I have reports, footage, tactical analyses. But I do not have your perspective. So Marcus told her, describing the chaos of retreat, finding her buried in rubble, the decision to carry her despite every reason not to. He described explosions and collapsing ground and his commanding officer screaming orders he ignored. He described her eyes opening, the sound she made, the way her hand had gripped his arm. I thought you said something, he admitted. In your language, obviously, which I didn't speak then. I've wondered sometimes what you said. I said, leave me. Ashira's expression carried something that might have been regret. I knew I was dying. I did not want you to die trying to save me. I told you to leave me and save yourself. Yeah, well, I've never been great at following orders. She laughed, and the sound transformed her face completely. I have read your military file, Marcus Webb. Your commanding officers noted you had a problem with authority, particularly when you disagreed with tactical decisions. They also noted you were among their most effective soldiers specifically because you thought independently. They used different words in my discharge review. Insubordinate featured prominently. They also recommended you for several commendations, which you refused. Ashira leaned forward slightly. Why did you refuse honors for saving me? Marcus shrugged uncomfortably. Didn't feel right. I was just doing what anyone should do. Getting medals for basic human decency seemed like admitting basic human decency was noteworthy enough to require recognition, which is a depressing commentary on our standards. And that, Ashira said quietly, is exactly why I have been searching for you. That perspective. That refusal to be celebrated for doing what you consider obvious kindness. You are either remarkably humble or completely insane. I've been told they're not mutually exclusive. They talked for hours, conversation ranging from war experiences to post-war adjustments, to Ashira's description of ascending to the throne, while still processing trauma from the battlefield. She spoke of political complications and assassination attempts, and the loneliness of ruling an empire, while being unable to trust whether people saw her or just her position. I have advisors, generals, an entire court of individuals surrounding me constantly, she said, her voice carrying unexpected vulnerability. And I have never felt more isolated. Everyone wants something. Everyone has agendas. Everyone sees the queen before they see Ashira. Except the dying soldier you saved once who didn't know you were the queen. Exactly. Her amber eyes met his directly. When you carried me through that battlefield, you saw a person who needed help. Not a political asset, not a strategic opportunity, just someone who mattered enough to risk your life for. Do you have any idea how desperately I've wanted to feel seen that way again? Marcus felt something shift in the room, atmosphere changing, that suggested they'd moved past formal dinner into something considerably more complicated. Your Majesty, Ashira, she stood, moving around the table to stand closer. When we are private, I would have you call me Ashira. I have been your Majesty for 6 years. I would like to be a person, just for tonight, with someone who has already proven they can see me as one. Ashira, Marcus said carefully, also standing. What exactly do you want from me? And please don't say gratitude, because I'm getting the distinct impression this is about something more complicated than thank you notes. She stepped closer, within arm's reach, and Marcus was struck again by how her eyes caught light like captured fire. I want to know if the person I have been remembering for 6 years is real, or if I have built you into something you are not. I want to understand whether what I felt on that battlefield, being held by someone who cared if I lived without needing political reasons to care, is something that can exist outside of life and death situations. That's a complicated ask. I am a complicated person asking complicated questions of someone who once made a simple choice that changed everything. Her hand touched his arm, gentle despite the strength he knew she possessed. Stay here, Marcus Webb. Not as a rescued soldier being thanked, but as someone who might help me remember what it feels like to be seen as Ashira rather than queen. Stay and let me know if what I remember is real. Marcus looked at her, seeing vulnerability beneath regal bearing, loneliness beneath authority, and something that might have been hope beneath careful control. I can stay for a while, he heard himself say. Though I should warn you, I'm really not good at court politics or formal behavior or any of the things I'm guessing are expected around royalty. Good, Ashira said, and her smile was genuine and slightly wicked. I am surrounded by people excellent at court politics. What I need is someone who will tell me when I am being ridiculous and will treat me like a person who can be wrong. I can definitely do that. I have extensive experience telling authority figures when they're being ridiculous. It's why my military career was so short. She laughed again, and Marcus realized he was in significant trouble. Not the kind involving explosions or enemy fire, but the considerably more dangerous kind involving amber eyes and a queen who'd been thinking about him for 6 years. The next morning arrived with Marcus waking in quarters that still felt absurdly luxurious, his brain immediately reminding him he'd somehow agreed to stay at an alien palace to help a queen figure out if her memories of him were accurate. This seemed like the kind of decision that made sense late at night over good food and intense conversation, but required serious reconsideration in daylight. He was contemplating this when Selenith appeared again, this time carrying what appeared to be formal clothing. The Queen has arranged for you to observe court sessions today, she said, laying out garments that looked expensive enough to fund a small colony. She believes you should understand what her daily life entails before making any decisions about extended stay. That's remarkably practical for someone who summoned me across star systems for personal reasons. Queen Ashira is many things, but impractical is not among them. Selenith helped him figure out how V-Rin formalware actually worked, which involved more layers than Marcus considered strictly necessary. She wants you to see her world completely, the good, the tedious, and the politically complicated. Then you can decide if you wish to remain part of it. The court session was held in the same vast chamber where Marcus had first seen reading people and situations with tactical awareness that explained how she'd survived both war and court politics. She was also, he noticed, performing. The carefully maintained expression, the measured responses, the way she held herself. It was all calculated to project authority while revealing nothing personal. It was effective and exhausting to watch. During a recess, a V-Rin noble approached Marcus with an expression suggesting curiosity barely restrained by politeness. "You are the human soldier," the noble said, his Terran standard carrying aristocratic precision. "The one who saved our queen during the war. I am Lord Vithais, senior member of the Council of Advisors." Marcus Webb, former corporal, current atmospheric processor technician, recent recipient of unexpected royal summons. Vithais smiled, though it didn't quite reach his eyes. "The Queen has spoken of you often. For 6 years, she has mentioned the human soldier who saved her life. We had begun to think you were a useful fiction, something to justify her peace policies. But here you are, quite real. Sorry to disappoint anyone expecting fiction. On the contrary, your reality presents interesting possibilities." Vithais lowered his voice slightly. "Our queen is young, powerful, and unmarried. Many factions have proposed matches with various noble houses, all rejected. Perhaps she has been waiting for someone who saw her as a person before seeing her crown." Marcus felt political currents moving around him that he didn't fully understand. "I'm just here because she asked me to come." "Of course." Vithais' smile suggested he didn't believe that for a second. "But intentions and outcomes rarely align in court politics, Marcus Webb. I suggest you consider carefully what role you wish to play in our queen's life, and whether you are prepared for the complications that come with proximity to power." The afternoon brought more court sessions, followed by Ashira conducting military briefings with her generals. Marcus watched her shift seamlessly from diplomatic negotiation to tactical analysis, seeing the warrior queen who'd led forces during the war emerge in her strategic thinking. When evening finally arrived, Ashira appeared in his quarters looking exhausted beneath her composed expression. "That," she said, collapsing into a chair with decidedly unregal grace, "was a particularly tedious day of governance. 3 territorial disputes, 2 trade negotiations, 17 petitions requiring personal attention, and a military readiness briefing that revealed problems we lack budget to address properly. You made it look effortless." That is the job, make the impossible look effortless while quietly screaming internally. She accepted the drink Marcus offered, having figured out palace beverage systems through experimentation. "What did you think, watching me rule?" "I think it looks exhausting, also lonely. You're surrounded by people constantly, but none of them seem to actually talk to you, just at you with agendas attached." Ashira's laugh was tired but genuine. "That is court life precisely. Everyone wants something, everyone has motives, everyone sees opportunities rather than people. It is why she stopped, looking vulnerable suddenly. "It is why I brought you here. You are the only person I have encountered in 6 years who saw me without political calculations attached. To be fair, I didn't know you were the queen. Might have calculated differently with that information." "Would you have?" She leaned forward, studying him. "I have been wondering that. If you knew I was crown princess, would you still have saved me?" Marcus considered this seriously. "Honestly, Probably yes, but my internal monologue would have involved more cursing and existential crisis about political ramifications. The fundamental decision, not leaving someone to die, that doesn't change based on their job title. And that, Ashira said softly, is exactly what I needed to hear, that you see past titles to people beneath them. She stood, moving to the window overlooking palace gardens. Lord Vithai spoke to you today. He mentioned you've rejected various noble marriage proposals, and implied I might be here for romantic political purposes. Vithai sees everything through political lenses. It is useful for governance and tedious for personal matters. She turned back to face him. I have rejected proposals because they were based on political advantage rather than any genuine connection. Because being married to someone who sees my crown before seeing me sounds like extended isolation with legal documentation. Whereas summoning an ex-soldier you barely know is much more reasonable. I know you, Marcus Webb. I know you value decency over orders. I know you are brave enough to carry enemy soldiers through active combat and stubborn enough to ignore direct commands when you disagree. I know you make jokes when you are uncomfortable and that you refuse recognition for kindness because you consider it basic rather than exceptional. She moved closer. I have studied you for 6 years through reports and footage, and the memory of your voice promising not to let me die. What I do not know is whether the person I have constructed from those fragments matches the reality standing in front of me. Nobody matches the version of themselves others construct, Marcus said. We're all messy and complicated and inconsistent in ways that don't fit neat narratives. Then show me your messiness and complications. Stay here long enough for me to see the real Marcus Webb, and I will show you the real Ashira beneath the queen. Her amber eyes held his. I am offering you something I have offered no one else, the chance to know me as a person rather than a position. If you are willing to risk discovering I am not who you hoped, I am willing to risk discovering you are not who I remembered. Marcus looked at her, seeing hope and fear and loneliness all mixed together beneath royal bearing. He thought about atmospheric processors and quiet life, and the safety of avoiding anything complicated. Then he thought about amber eyes on a frozen battlefield and promises made without understanding their full weight. All right, he said, I'll stay. Not as political statement or romantic strategy, just as someone trying to understand someone else. But I'm warning you now. I'm terrible at formality. I will absolutely tell you when I think you're wrong, and I have no idea how to navigate court politics. Perfect, Ashira said, her smile transforming her face. I am surrounded by people excellent at formality and politics. What I need is someone who will be honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. I can definitely do uncomfortable honesty. It's basically my primary skill. She laughed, and Marcus realized he was committed now to whatever complicated situation this was becoming. A queen who remembered him, a debt that couldn't be repaid, and the possibility that 6 years of memory might become something real in present time. 3 months passed like water through gravity wells, inevitable, occasionally turbulent, and leaving permanent marks on the landscape. Marcus had settled into palace life with the same pragmatic adaptation he'd brought to frontline combat, which was to say he accepted the absurdity and focused on what actually mattered. What mattered, increasingly, was Ashira. They'd fallen into routines that probably scandalized the court, but neither cared enough to stop. Breakfast together before her morning briefings, where she'd ask his opinion on political matters, and he'd provide perspectives uncomplicated by court politics. Evenings where she'd appear in his quarters exhausted from governance, and he'd make her laugh with stories from his catastrophically normal pre-war life. Late nights discussing everything from philosophy to military tactics, to whether Viren cuisine was objectively superior to human food, or if Marcus was just being polite. I'm telling you, Marcus said during one such evening, no amount of sophisticated preparation makes Kelthai's root taste like anything besides angry dirt. You lack refined palate, Ashira replied, though she was smiling. Kelthai's root is traditional delicacy. Tradition doesn't make it delicious. Sometimes tradition is just collective agreement to pretend something terrible is actually good. She'd laughed, that genuine unguarded sound she'd started making more frequently, and Marcus had felt something shift in his chest that was becoming increasingly familiar and increasingly complicated. The court had noticed their growing closeness, naturally. Nobles whispered, advisors calculated, and Lord Vithais had approached Marcus twice more with suggestions that perhaps defining the relationship officially might be politically advantageous. Marcus had politely told him that reducing personal connections to political advantage was exactly the kind of thinking that made court life depressing, and Vithais had looked at him like he'd suggested rewriting physics. But tonight was different. Tonight, Ashira had summoned him to her private chambers with unusual formality, and Marcus had arrived to find her wearing traditional formal, where that indicated significant ceremony was imminent. "We need to discuss something," she said without preamble. "The council is demanding I choose a consort. They believe an unmarried queen approaching her prime years without heir designation creates succession instability." Marcus felt his stomach do complicated things. "What do you want to discuss about it?" "I want to discuss whether you would consider being that consort." Ashira's expression was carefully controlled, but her eyes held vulnerability. "Before you answer, understand what I am asking. It would mean bonding ceremony that ties you legally and spiritually to Virin Empire. It would mean public life and political complications, and being scrutinized by populations who might resent human influence on their queen. It would mean giving up privacy and quiet life, and probably being targeted by factions opposed to cross-species royal marriage. That's a compelling sales pitch, really selling it. But I am being honest about complications because I value you too much to deceive you about what this would entail." She stepped closer. "But I must also be honest about what I want. I want you, Marcus Webb. Not as political strategy or symbolic gesture, but as partner who sees me rather than my crown. As someone who will tell me when I am being ridiculous, and who makes me laugh when governance becomes unbearable. As the person who proved 6 years ago that kindness matters more than tactical advantage, and who has proven every day since that the man I remembered is real." Marcus's brain was trying to process that an alien queen was essentially proposing to him, in the most complicated way possible. "Ashira, I need you to understand something. I'm not noble or sophisticated or good at politics. I'm just a former soldier who maintains atmospheric processors and makes inappropriate jokes during formal occasions. Are you sure you want that permanently attached to your monarchy?" "I am absolutely certain." Her hands found his, her touch gentle. "I have spent 3 months learning the real Marcus Webb, not the hero I constructed in memory. I know you are stubborn and occasionally infuriating, and have opinions about food that border on offensive. I know you hate formal occasions, and that you solve problems by being aggressively practical in ways that confuse my advisors. And I know you see me, not Queen Ashira Valtek, but Ashira, the person who still has nightmares about frozen battlefields and who gets anxious before major political decisions, and who laughs at terrible jokes precisely because they are terrible." "You're really setting yourself up for a lifetime of terrible jokes here. I am prepared for this sacrifice." Her smile was soft and genuine. "What I am asking, Marcus Webb, is whether you are prepared to stand beside someone complicated and powerful and occasionally difficult, who will love you fiercely and probably frustrate you regularly, who comes with political baggage and security concerns, and an empire that needs guidance." Marcus looked at her, seeing the woman beneath the crown, remembering amber eyes on a frozen battlefield and quiet evenings laughing over terrible food, and 3 months of discovering that memory matched reality in ways that mattered. He thought about atmospheric processors and quiet life, and the safety of avoiding complications. Then he thought about how she smiled when he made her laugh, and how she trusted him with vulnerabilities she showed no one else, and how being seen completely by someone who saw you completely was worth any amount of political complications. "Yes," he said. "On one condition, you have to promise that we can occasionally escape court life and be normal people who do boring things like arguing about food and watching terrible entertainment, and not discussing politics for entire evenings." Ashira's face transformed with joy. "I promise regular escapes from governance for aggressively normal activities. Also, I will attempt to make you appreciate Kelthai's route properly." "That's never happening, but I admire your optimism." She kissed him then, and Marcus discovered that queens kissed with the same focused intensity they brought to military tactics and political negotiations, which was to say very well and with clear strategic objectives. When they separated, Ashira's expression had shifted to something more serious. "There will be challenges. Factions who oppose this, security concerns, cultural complications between our peoples. Being my consort will not be easy, Marcus. Nothing worth doing is easy. Also, I've survived war and court politics, so I'm reasonably confident I can handle whatever comes next." He smiled. "Besides, you've been searching for me for 6 years. Seems like you should get to keep me now that you've found me." The bonding ceremony was held 3 weeks later, a combination of Virin traditional elements and human cultural incorporation that probably satisfied nobody completely, but represented genuine attempt at cross-species union. Marcus wore formal clothing that still felt absurd, stood before assembled nobles and dignitaries, and made vows in Virin language he'd been studying frantically. When Ashira spoke her vows, her voice carried across the vast chamber, declaring before her empire that she chose Marcus Webb as consort and partner, that his honor was bound to hers, that she claimed him freely and completely. "I choose the soldier who saved me when saving me served no advantage," she said. "I choose the man who sees me rather than my crown. I choose the person who proves daily that kindness and humor and stubborn decency matter more than political calculation. I choose Marcus Webb, knowing exactly who he is and wanting exactly that person beside me." Marcus's vows were simpler, because he'd never been good at elaborate speeches. "I choose Ashira, the person who laughed at terrible jokes and trusted me with vulnerabilities, and who deserves someone who sees her completely. I promise to be honest, even when honesty is uncomfortable. I promise to make you laugh, even when governance is unbearable. And I promise to remind you regularly that you are a person before you are a queen, because someone needs to, and apparently I'm qualified for that job now." The ceremony concluded with traditional Virin bonding ritual that Marcus didn't entirely understand but participated in faithfully. And then they were officially consort and queen, husband and wife, partners in both personal and political sense. The celebration afterward was elaborate and exhausting, filled with nobles offering congratulations, while calculating new political angles and human diplomats looking vaguely panicked about implications of this union. Marcus shook approximately 3,000 hands and answered approximately 6,000 questions and smiled until his face hurt. Finally, late in the evening, Ashira pulled him away from crowds, leading him to a private balcony overlooking palace gardens. "You survived," she said, leaning against him with tired contentment. "First major state function as consort, and you only made 3 significant political gaffes." "Only 3. I was aiming for 5, feeling underachieving now." She laughed, the sound carrying genuine joy. "Thank you, Marcus Webb, for saying yes, for standing beside me, for being exactly who you are even when court would prefer you be someone more conventional. Thank you for searching for me for 6 years, and for being stubborn enough to actually find me." Marcus wrapped his arms around her, feeling her relax against him. "Though I still think summoning me across star systems was dramatic even by royal standards. I am a dramatic person. You will need to accept this about me. I can work with dramatic. Adds excitement to atmospheric processor maintenance background." They stood together watching Viren Prime's 3 moons rise over the gardens. Two people who'd found each other across war and years, and the complications of their different worlds. A queen who'd needed someone to see her as human, and a soldier who'd proven that kindness mattered more than tactical advantage. "Do you regret it?" Ashira asked quietly, accepting this complication, giving up quiet life. Marcus considered this seriously, because she deserved serious answers. "I regret that the coffee here is somehow worse than coalition military coffee, which I didn't think was possible. I regret that formal occasions involve uncomfortable clothing and excessive handshaking. I regret that Lord Vithais keeps trying to give me political advice I don't want. But I don't regret you, not for a second." He turned her to face him, seeing amber eyes catch the moonlight. "You asked me once if I recalled you, soldier. I recall every moment, carrying you through that battlefield, promising not to let you die, wondering what happened to you afterward. And now I get to know what happened. You became a queen who changed an empire, and somehow, impossibly, you still wanted the soldier who saved you. I wanted the person who saw me when I was dying and chose kindness. That person is worth any political complication." She kissed him softly. "Welcome to permanent complications, Marcus Webb. I promise it will be interesting." "I'm counting on it," Marcus said, and meant it completely. Years later, when historians analyzed the Viren Empire's unexpected alliance with humanity, they would trace it back to a frozen battlefield and a soldier who refused to abandon a wounded enemy. They would discuss political ramifications and strategic implications, and the symbolic power of cross-species royal marriage. But Marcus and Ashira knew the real truth, that sometimes the most significant moments came from simple choices made without understanding their full weight. That kindness mattered. That being seen completely by someone who saw you completely was worth any amount of complexity. And that queens who searched for 6 years generally found what they were looking for, especially when what they were looking for was someone who would make terrible jokes during formal occasions and remind them they were people before they were crowns. It was, by any reasonable standard, a terrible basis for international relations and an even worse foundation for royal marriage. It was also, by every measure that actually mattered, absolutely perfect.
No mames, con tanto ruido ambiente ni se escucha, cabrón.
Está reunido con máximo, tú puedes saludar, nosotros nos vamos hasta donde
No mames,
estés.
hay un chingo de ruido
Gracias,
ambiente.
mamá,
Ay,
conmigo
perdón,
de esa partida.
perdón. Valió verga, güey. ¿Creen que si pregunto me lo den? Yo digo que ha de haber varios listos, ¿no? ¿O no?
Yo soy gay. Pito, 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 pito,
No.
pito, pito,
Ya
pito,
empezamos,
pito,
güey.
pito.
No. Hay niños, güey. Chale, compadre, ya valió verga. Vámonos, güey. A la verga, como que 1500. No mames, güey. Cortesía de Heriberto, desgraciados. Oigan, chatoncia, esto está horrible.
¡Ábreme, hija de la chingada!
Se reprodujo esta carta.
Frases que Cars nunca dijo. Digo que, hola Nitrato, ¿cómo estás? Bienvenido, hermano, ¿cómo andamos? ¿Cómo les va? Pues bien, hermano, la neta, pero hay un chingo de clientes. No mames. No mames, Carla ya tiene la racha de 100, ahora toca la de 200. No manches, esta Carla. Oye, Carla, me dijiste que renovabas el 3, ¿verdad? A ver, aguántame. Es que esto está imposible, brother. Vale, verga, güey. Ay, no. Mira, hola, Bebo. Hola, Elliot. Primero de mayo, Bebo. Todo mañana. Hoy dejo de salir el niño que llevo dentro. ¿Cómo? ¿Cómo? No mames, cabrón. Venga, señora. Ay, no. Güey, yo quiero bajar el visor, pero hace mucho calor. Valiendo verga, cabrón. Turu. ¿Qué tan buena idea fue aceptar un Carl's Jr. en pleno Día del Niño cuando todos están participando por un cochecito del Apache? Que de hecho ayer lo vimos, güey. No ma. Ey. Ey. Racha de 105, no mames.
¡Ábreme, hija de la chingada! ¡Ábreme!
Está bien verga ese. Son unos pendejos, güey. Ese puto audio está bien verga, güey, el amo. Igual como si aceptaras uno de McDonald's. El McDonald's, güey.
¿Te palpita el ano?
No,
¿Sientes palpitaciones en el ano? Tienes el ano infectado. Debes irte inmediatamente por urgencias.
Se reprodujo esta tarta.
¿Qué onda, güey? Pues por lo que veo llevan un chingo aquí, güey.
Se reprodujo esta tarta.
No mames, chat. Valió, güey. Me lo estoy pasando re bien, boludo. Chale, chat. ¿Qué hacemos? Chatoncio, ¿qué hacemos, güey? Aparte, les digo, también tanto ruido ambiente no se escucha nada, ni escucho nada, ni nada, güey. Literal no nos escucho. Murmullo. Güey, neta, sí está feo. Ojo, Zenia se compró su moto. Pero Zenia nos dijo ayer que no sabía manejar, entonces, ¿cómo ahí? ¿Cómo lo vas a hacer, güey?